You're listening to the Faith Made Welcome podcast, a progressive podcast of faith where we look at Christianity from a progressive Baptist tradition. This podcast is brought to you by Commonwealth Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. So whoever you are, wherever you are, or whatever you think about faith, you're welcome here. Please let us know what you think about our podcast by subscribing to it or by sharing it with someone who may be looking for a podcast like this. And we would love to hear your feedback. So please leave us a comment or question on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Let's get started.
I counted down myself.
You did? Well, I pushed with you just because I'm in the habit of doing so.
Out of sympathy.
Okay. Although I did feel like I should have given folks a rundown of how this starts off.
We can do that. Yeah, you can give them a rundown.
What episode is this?
18?
Mm-hmm. 18. And I would like to remind everyone that we are celebrating the season of Advent and not that other one that comes around Easter.
Lent.
Don't say it. I'll say it.
Ixnay on the intlay.
Okay.
It's totally Lent. I mean Advent.
So Paul will just have to take moments where we all say Advent and just put it like...
Yeah, we just need to say the word Advent several times in different tones and inflections and volumes so I can just splice in the right one when we need it. But yeah, awesome.
Cool. So we usually get started with some introductions. We'll introduce the pastor folks first since they are pastoral. I don't know. That's just the way we tend to do it. Then we'll say something about me and Paul because we're always on the call. And then we'll move. Let's do alphabeticals. We'll do Lenny and then Marcia. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Let's do this thing. I think this is the first Faith Made Welcome recorded at night. No, it's
Halloween.
Not. Hocus Pocus
episode
Halloween. Was definitely at night.
Halloween was at night, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was bourbon. Okay.
There was a lot of bourbon.
Yeah.
I support that.
Yeah.
Goodness.
That sounds fun.
Lenny, you're a member of the bourbon ministry then.
I love whiskey, bourbon, and rye. I just started collecting bourbons.
We should talk.
So Cheri has started the Baptist Bourbon Ministry.
Yes.
You are now a part of the ministry since
you are. Now that I know you're a bourbon guy. Great.
Let's do a bourbon whiskey tasting night.
Yes.
I'm down.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So here we go with episode 18 of Faith Made Welcome, our third week of Advent. We're here to talk about joy, which there's a lot of joy songs we could sing, but instead we're just going to do introductions. So who do we have on today's episode?
I am Robin, one of the pastors at Commonwealth Baptist Church.
And I'm Marty, the other pastor at Commonwealth Baptist Church.
Excellent. And I continue to be Sherry Spiegel, the first voice you hear on Faith Made Welcome, along with my partner in many crimes.
I am one of the voices we often hear on Faith Made Welcome, Paul Fitzgerald, and I'm happy to be here again to talk about this wonderful topic. And we have, Sherry, we have a couple of guests here with us today, too. Mm-hmm. Who do we got?
All right. You got me. I'm Lenny, Lenny Wrigley, just a member of Commonwealth Baptist Church.
And a deacon.
And a deacon, yes. And a seminarian who is going through finals right now. So
you have lots of joy.
Yay. Thank you for taking the time. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time.
The joy comes when they're done.
Yeah.
And following on that, I am Marcia and I have been a member of Commonwealth Baptist since 1995.
Wow.
Probably longer than Lenny is old.
No, 1995, I remember the Braves winning the World Series.
Oh.
So, yeah. I'm not going to say when I was born because that's just going to tell everybody my age. So we're just going to keep that on the deal. I'm just going to not say that one. So I do remember 1995. Yes.
We're going to keep that secret, Lenny.
Yes.
You and I can compare notes on that later, Lenny, and see.
Offline.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So when we asked you here to be on a podcast about joy, what was the first thing that ran through y'all's heads when you were like, really? I've been invited to talk about joy? What came to mind?
Who wants to go first?
It's a tough year.
You can go for it, Lenny.
Yeah, go for it, Lenny.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely been a tough year. And, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine over text when I remembered, I have to do a podcast on joy. And I'm like, they would do a podcast on joy right after a Taylor Swift album release for me. So I'm like, how am I going to, Taylor Swift is so like an album is, any artist is very tangible, and that's not really like the spiritual joy that we look for is, the first thing someone says is, a Taylor Swift album. So I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to talk about anything other than this. And I remember her saying, you find joy in many different areas, and she was saying you as in me, that I found joy in like some of the closure in certain areas in our life, and then also new openings where her creativity can explore those new openings. I'm like, that is really, really good. I was like, I kind of wish I actually thought of that so I didn't have to give her credit, but I'm giving her credit because she's probably gonna listen.
So I'm keeping a tally of the number of times that you say T Swift's name during this episode. We're already at 3.
I love it. Yeah. Well, so it's been a really hard year, right? And so, we're thinking about like, okay, who could we get to come talk about joy? And like, so it's like, well, if nothing else, Lenny gets joy from Taylor Swift. We all know it. He's at least one person who has joy in his life. Even
Robin, I didn't say it that time.
I'm counting it.
It doesn't.
I'll keep a separate one.
Okay. No, but yeah, it's crazy because I just knew that was going to come up. It is what it is, but and I'm not saying the name, but it makes you reflect on kind of what joy really means and where you get that joy. And I feel like true joy is things that are not tangible, non-perishable joy, which is it doesn't have an expiration date. And that could be, of course, find joy in the Lord because he's one who provides and protects and guides. And but then also in the small things, especially like the pandemic, we got to count our blessings where we have it. It could be joy, and maybe you're going through a rough time with your family, but you have those friends, those coworkers that check up on you. I felt like that's where some of that joy comes from too. And I felt like that's what my first reaction was, but then I said an artist's name as a joke. So I'm not saying that artist's name anymore. Challenge on, Robin. Challenge on.
Lenny, I love that though, because right before this podcast, I got actually a note on Twitter about Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band's performance on SNL. And I went to it because the headline was Bruce Springsteen's joyous blah, blah, blah. And I went and I listened to that like right before this. So you and I are communing about the music, music thing going on when it as related to joy for sure.
And I mean, I feel like for me, and this probably comes to no surprise to most people on this call, like music and joy are intimately connected for me. In fact, I don't think I knew I wanted to join this church, like Commonwealth Baptist Church, until the week that I made these two pastors do the most ridiculous thing ever, which was we were doing a series on the sacred and the secular. And so they asked any person that came to the church to put forward the song they wanted, that the place where they found the sacred. And I have a tattoo on arm that comes from a punk rock song. And so I put this song forward. And so that week, Marty played some punk rock. He sang it with his mandolin.
A mandolin.
Yeah, yep.
Oh, that's wild.
And then Robin preached about it. And so that, I think, that was like a huge moment for me of being able to like take this thing that is joyful for me outside of the church and see it celebrated within the church. That was straight up joy for me. Yeah, for sure. And they did a good job.
I think that was the first time like a mandolin and punk rock came together at all. So it was a pretty good trip.
Yeah, maybe.
Y'all want to do that?
I'm wearing a tie.
Who knows? But I do remember, like, I just got back from a conference in Atlanta and I drove, and the whole way down there and the whole way back, I was just windows down, cranking that song just so I could try to memorize how fast they said all those words.
Mm-hmm.
That was not joyful, but I
Hey, the song literally says, no one says it's going to be easy, but I'm not afraid to try.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, I think music can be a source of joy, right?
Yeah, it absolutely can. And Marie Kondo says, that's her guideline for her rule, right? Does this bring you joy? Does it spark, that's it, right? Does it spark joy?
Does it spark joy?
Yeah. And I don't know if anybody asked Marie Kondo how if it's joy versus something else. What are the sensations of joy? What are the feelings of joy? How do you know when you have it? Versus, it's catchy, or when is it joy? What's unique about joy?
Ooh, Paul's asking the softball.
I think that, for me, it actually changed over the course of time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're a child, and especially around Christmas, your birthday, Easter, there was for me this huge swelling of emotion that would engulf me. Mm-hmm. And literally by the time you got to the event, the wave was so massive. And in some cases, the event itself never measured up to that feeling that led up to it, the feeling of joy and in anticipation. And for me now, joy is, and I think it's Lenny who said it, it's in those small moments. And I had a great one this week. I don't know if you guys saw it, but Wednesday's sunrise was spectacular. It was a light violet sky, and it was so vibrant and so unexpected. It just took my breath away. And I had another experience of that when I picked up the Alexandria Times on Friday, and they had a picture of my sunrise.
Oh, wow.
And in that moment, I thought, oh, wow, I got it again. And I also got this experience of sharing it, and that brought me joy as well. So for me, it really has shifted over time. I'm curious about if that's the case for the rest of you. Like, what's your experience of joy over time?
I think that's great. And you brought up a really good point. It's all these different emotions and feelings. And I feel like joy is that umbrella of these emotions that we can get during a certain time or a period. Even if it might be there in the moment or reflecting back on something, just like you said, you got joy in that moment, but then you reflect back on that photo that you took and you got that same joy again. So I think joy covers an entire section of just different emotions and how you're feeling and how you can process that feeling. I think when I was like, how do I even explain joy? I'm like, of course, being in seminary, you kind of go through to the Bible, and then you go through maybe let's do a little bit of a word study. And Robin, I've talked to you a few times in our coffee, and I'm in a Hebrew class right now, and you study words, and you study okay, how many times is that word used? Is it used in many different ways? Which is funny because joy, if you look at one translation, joy is referenced throughout the Bible like 165 times. Okay, so around that range for the one word joy. Then you have other translations that will mention that word joy like 182, and then another one would do 218. And you're like, okay, so why aren't they using the same word for the word? And the reason why is because there's different emotions that are involved with joy. It's rejoice, it's joyful, it's happy, happiness. You can use excitement. So I'm like, wow, like joy is very complex, and I don't think you can really just explain it by one thing. It's an experience. Sorry, that was my soapbox.
Well, you had said something earlier on, right, when we first started, and I like you said it, and I got the pen, and I was like, I'm going to write that down. Spiritual joy. It's like when we first started talking about this, you said this word spiritual joy. Do you remember that? What is spiritual joy, and how is that different than, sorry, Robin, Taylor Swift joy?
I was thinking more like spiritual joy as in, you find joy in like your prayer life and building your prayer life, you building your relationship with God, the divine, and finding your strength in, God. It kind of comes down to the scripture, you may weep for a night, but joy comes in the morning. That is that spiritual joy that when you lay your head down at night, you're going to be okay. You're going to be taken care of. And I feel like that's where I get my spiritual joy. And then you have the other joys where, artists come out with an album that really speak to you and tell stories where your mind can just wander into a different imagination and picture different things. Maybe I didn't get to see that sunrise, but maybe I was picturing something of that sunrise that gave me joy in a song or some type of poem. If you're into poems or art, you're painting, you're drawing, you're sculpting, you're climbing rocks, you're going golfing, there's different joys, but I feel like that do have a spiritual connection too as well. So I think that's the difference in my brain. When I was saying that, I was trying to say, I was not wanting to talk about Taylor Swift. I wanted to talk more.
What are we at, Robin? 6?
Robin's jotting it down. I didn't want to talk about that artist. I was like, all right, we're going to be doing this with the church. So, of course this artist is going to come up to me because that brings joy. But there was still that spiritual element of, maybe I found some type of closure in a section of my life that needed that closing. And I could find joy in that. That if something needs that closure, or, I find a new beginning somewhere else, and we can find those joys in those new beginnings as well. And we can experience those through music, through art, through activities, through connecting with each other. So I think it holds two different points. It's a spiritual joy that has that underlining act of God in it. And then you have the at-hand joy in the moment, right then and there, just because I like listening and hearing her voice.
Right.
If that makes any sense. Sorry, I keep on going soapboxes. So just tell me to stop.
This is the time. This is the time to do it. Right?
It's all good. It's all
That's
good.
all podcasting is.
Okay,
Yeah,
because I'm like, I
that's
can
all
just
it
go.
is.
Yeah, we just take turns on the soapbox. So Robin and Marty, would you like your turn? I mean, it's just what we do. But one of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking, Lenny, is like how important connection seems to be to joy. Like whether it is that we're connecting to like a creator, or we're connecting to each other, or even just connecting to ourselves. Is joy, does connection have to be there for us to experience joy? Is connection an essential property of joy?
So, go ahead, Marcia.
Well, I was just going to say, Robin, and I think connection is definitely key. And if I think about that sunrise again, it just gave me a feeling that all was right with the world. That it gives you not only that feeling of, in a lot of times it's beauty, whether it's in a song, something that occurs in nature, a gift someone gives you, an expression, an experience, is that it gives you that moment to stop, and you are enriched by that experience. And I think that's what you were saying, where you were going, Lenny, when you were saying it's both external and it's internal. It is this, I think that there is something that occurs externally that sparks something internal. Now I lay that at your feet, Robin, so you can take it from there.
Well, I think that there's a soul connection, I think, with joy. That to me would be the difference between joy and happiness. Is that happiness might be on the surface and can change, at the drop of a hat. Whereas joy is something deeper. And so joy is something that can stay with us and even sustain us, even when we're not happy, if that makes sense. And you were talking about a lot of these, like paradoxes, I guess, in a way, opposites, the internal, the external. In Surprised by Joy, C.S. Lewis says that joy has a connection with both memories and longings. So, Lenny, earlier you mentioned something about, well, maybe this music means so much to me because, there was some point in my life when I had closure, right? That there's joy somehow can connect us with memories of things that were good. But it can also connect us with longing of what can be, which may be some of what that sunrise was, Marcia, in the middle of a pandemic when everything feels like it's claustrophobic and closing in. And all of a sudden you saw this, expansive beauty that was, didn't have an end. So, I mean, there's layers, I think, to joy that are what separate it from happiness. It's deeper.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately about joy is, to me, it has this, I think for me, I connect it to connectiveness, right? But I also see it as being almost sneaky. Like joy sneaks up on me. And I often, for a long time, I thought I have to seek happiness. And I was always running after happiness. But joy pops up in the strangest moments. And it is sometimes the thing that we need in a pandemic, right? If we can allow it to sneak up on us, that sunset sneaks up on us. There is just this sneaky property of it. And I think that's what makes it so great in some ways, is you don't have to prepare for it. You don't have to set the table for it. It catches you.
Shows up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember thinking about this topic of joy. I sit back and I think about all the Christmases when I was a little kid, right when December hit, it took forever, for Christmas to get here. And now that I'm adult, it's there's not enough time, right? It just flies up. And, but when you're a kid, you're just filled with this anticipation and this joyfulness that, it's a world where everybody's singing all the songs, the music's playing, people are wrapping gifts, and in normal times, people are rushing everywhere with smiles on their faces. That's what I kind of envision when I think about getting ready for Christmas. And I had no other responsibilities but to sit and watch it and wait, and just get surprised here and there by, what could that box be? Or, oh, I love this song, or we're decorating the Christmas tree. And I had no other responsibilities but to just sit and just be overwhelmed with joy.
But now, as I've gotten older, it's been kind of like, how are we going to survive this? And how are we going to make sure that our family feels joyful in this time where there's just chaos all around us? And I think for me, I've been thinking about, Advent, lighting all the candles. We've lit the hope candle, the peace, and now we've lit the the pink joy candle, right?
Paul loves the pink candle.
What's up with that pink candle?
The pink candle. And I think the joy being on the third Sunday of Advent is just a reminder that joy reminds us why we seek for hope and peace in the first place. I think it's just a reminder during this long anticipated season that joy is the reason why we long for hope and we long for peace, and it's why we have faith. And I think as much as we can hold faith for each other, we can also hold joy for each other, like you were describing, Marcia, with sharing that picture of the sunrise. I mean, that meant a lot. And then Lenny sharing his love of Taylor Swift and talking about all the songs that influence him. I said Taylor Swift.
I knew she was going to put it down.
Twice.
You're good.
I think making a tally might be something that brings Robin joy.
Yeah,
and it sneaks up on her. Like,
surprise.
It's like a Jack in the Box.
Yeah.
Anyway, I really just think that joy just is a reminder to us that the reason why we seek what we seek in our lives.
I completely agree with you on that, Marty. I think joy does sneak up on us, but at the same time, we have to seek out where the joy is in our lives in certain areas. I know going through military and you're in basic training, you're cut off from the world for like 3 months. And drill sergeants are just like, going through the military is pretty much like a big hazing test. But one thing they've taught us that I have been able to kind of grasp and hold on to and teach others that I serve with is we call it hunt the good stuff. Now down in the South it sounds much different, but it's initially just hunt the good stuff. And it doesn't mean that you're not going through some stuff right now, and it doesn't mean that you're not real with yourself with what is going on right now, but it's taking moments to find areas that either you're grateful for or areas that you see is a light in that time. And I was thinking about this, Cheri, you were talking about how it sneaks up on you. It's crazy how you can like walk down the street and you're like, okay, let me, you see, especially here in DC, you see police officers going down the street, you see, homeless people, there's lines at food pantries, like by a coffee shop near my place. Like there's so much I could see and be like, oh, that is like, I just want to help. And then, this just irks me and tears me apart. But then joy randomly sneaks up on me when you're walking down the street too. You find different things that you see beauty in. It could be, a sunrise. It could be, maybe a marking on a building that's just like, oh, wow. Like it could be, a building, putting up their plywood to protect their store, but there's love written on it. And there's, Black Lives Matter on it. There's justice for all. There's something beautiful that you could see out of it. And sometimes we have to take our mindset. Yes, there's plywood on a building right now, but man, isn't it putting off a beautiful message at the same time, a beautiful piece of art that someone got to express themselves through? And I think there's joy in that. And we can find those places where there are joy in times like this. Even though it's hard, I feel like we do have to train ourselves sometimes to, all right, where is this joy? Where are you? Where are you hiding joy? I need you to sneak out.
There is a project that's part of Yale Divinity School that is called, I think the name of it, I think it's called the Joy and Human Flourishing Project. It's headed by a theologian named Miroslav Voth. And the concept is, and I think it's right on, and it's connected with what we're saying, that joy is actually a part of a flourishing life. So any life that is flourishing experiences those surprising moments of joy. But part of why a theologian and a divinity school started this project is because there was this sense that in church, and maybe in culture in general, it is easier for us to talk about the things going wrong in the world and in our lives than it is for us to give voice to those moments or experiences that bring us joy. And how might our communities, whether they are churches or Sunday school classes or classrooms, how might those communities be different if we were able to talk more freely about joy and give voice to it? Like, what might that do to each other? You know, like I get some delight out of watching Lenny get crazy excited about Taylor Swift. And
that's a tally mark.
It made me smile to hear Marcia describe this sunrise. And how it made her feel. So, I mean, just imagine, like, if we were able to do that more often, other connect to the big stuff. I do think that joy somehow connects us with something holy, no matter what we call that.
Yeah.
And it reminds us of flourishing life, and it connects. I think joy is very closely connected to love.
Well, Paul, this is something we talk about, like, when we talk about sympathetic joy.
Yeah.
Quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's not all schadenfreude, the, you know, pleasure at other people's pain, but there's something beautiful about joy from other people's joy.
Although there is that too, though, isn't there? Right? There is schadenfreude there's a, you know, as evidenced by the fact that there's a word for it, you know, a long word for it. It must be a thing. Yeah, sympathetic joy is, for a lot of people, is tricky. It's hard. There are, you know, this notion of when somebody else is happy, I'm going to feel happiness for them. And when somebody else feels joy, I'm going to feel joyful for them. Not because I already love them or feel joy for them. I'm just going to be happy that they're happy. And that's all fun and games if you already love that person. What if you don't? What if you don't? What if this is somebody who you just have, not even somebody that you just don't know? What if this is somebody, a coworker who got that promotion that you didn't get? Or, you know, everybody got a 4% raise, but I only got a 3% raise. Or this person's bonus was bigger than mine. Or why did that person, the light turned red after that person went through it, but before I went? I mean, there's, you know, yet schadenfreude seems like this more reptilian, primitive urge that we live in a world where one person's joy is another person's loss of that joy. And does that have to be the case? And I think, you know, some of the old practices say, no, that there are things that we can do to prime ourselves, you know, mindsets that we can take, practices we can engage in, where we can start not convincing ourselves and beating ourselves up that one person's joy is everybody's joy, but just practices that ask the question, you know, wow, that person, I have no idea who they are, or my coworker got the promotion that I didn't. You know what? Congratulations. You know, that's great. I'm really glad you're happy about that. Why is that so hard? Why is that so hard? Because of some of these old and ancient practices that, you know, some of us on this podcast partake in. That's the one that's hardest. I mean, I can love everybody. That's easy. But being sympathetic joy, you know, that's the tough one, you know, because we always think that joy is a limited resource, that if somebody else has it, then it points out not that I can have it too, but it points out that I don't have it. and therefore there's room for resentment in other people having joy.
But it's not always that, like, so yes, I think that cultivating joy in other people's joy, like, that's a tricky practice.
A tricky one. Yeah, it's so much easier to be frustrated by it, than it is to be joyous in it.
But every now and then, like, other people's joy can just bring me random spontaneous joy. Like, how many times have you been at a traffic light, like, in your own, like, crappy mood, and then you look behind you and you see someone probably listening to Taylor Swift, let's be honest, but like they are just like into it with music, and like this is like my favorite thing in the world, just like watching someone else just like in it
in their car,
no abandon, like just they're just in it, like, and then all of a sudden like I find myself smiling, not because I'm listening to it, but just because like, what a world we live in that people can get lost in something like that.
Yeah, you've tapped into shared joy when you've done that. You've tapped into
living life on a small scale versus big scale. So I was struck by what Marty said earlier about, when you're a kid, and what I had talked about with holidays, what holidays were like. It was this immense, big building kind of thing. And now I find that it is in those little moments, Cheri. And I'm like you, I love looking around. When you're at the stoplights, it's beautiful. It's one of the reasons I take walks and I stopped running years ago. One of many reasons. But I love seeing my neighborhood, my area on the small scale. So like what's happening over here? What's happening there? What's the story behind this mitten left on this mailbox? What is... taking time to look at the poetry fence on Howell Street, all these kinds of little teeny moments that, as Robin said, contribute to a life of flourishing. It is flourishing. If you have the capacity to have joy, even in the midst of really bad stuff, sad stuff, hard stuff, pandemics, lost what I'm a recruiter for a living, so I run into a lot of people who are out of work.
Yeah.
If you can capture and appreciate those moments of joy, you can almost get through anything. It really is a lifeline to take you to the next spot.
Like joy is almost like a voice of protest to our despair.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love that, Marty.
That was really good.
I'm writing that down.
Oh, thanks. It's a way of being. Joy is like reminding us again and again that there is joy with you. I mean, that's why we keep telling the Christmas story over and over. I mean, Jesus came in the midst of no joy, total chaos, and then the angels sang about it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think joy is just like we've been saying in a lot of these Advent themes. There's a communal aspect that we can hold each other in joy, just like hold each other in hope and peace. We can do that for each other.
I think there's a silly aspect to it too, which is kind of in a moment of abandon. So I haven't said Taylor Swift yet, so I'll say it now. But,
I think it's all of us.
Watching Lenny get excited about this, but there's kind of this piece. I'm reminded of David as the ark, comes into the city, and he is dancing. He's dancing with a wild abandon and excitement. And his wife says, "Oh my God, you look like a fool," and he's like, "Who cares?" And there is in that moment of appreciation of joy or an expression of joy where it doesn't matter. All that stuff about what people think about you, getting better, you're not doing evil, being perfect, all those kinds of things just go away. And in that moment, you're fully your own essence. And it's kind of, does that occur for anybody else too? Do you get that kind of silliness that there's a truth, there's a funny piece to it?
Yeah, if you want to see that silliness, then you should take Cheri's advice and ride up beside me when I'm listening to Taylor. You'll just see me just jamming out, and I drive like a Volkswagen Bug, And so can you just imagine me after a drill weekend with like my military uniform on, jamming out to Taylor Swift in my bug? Sorry, Robin got 2 like strikes on that one.
This is bringing me joy.
Yeah.
So yes, it does, joy does, it does have that silly aspect where, you are being you in a very happy moment. And I think that kind of comes back to even, what Marty was saying, Christmas. I feel like growing up with Christmas, looking back now and growing up with like Christmas, the joys was actually like in that build up. And I feel like what Robin was saying was the happiness was actually like opening and then seeing if you were right that one of the presents you guessed. But that joy is so special about Christmas. It's just like you can see a Christmas light, especially for me, I'm a Christmas baby. You can see that Christmas light, and for some reason, it just brings so much joy. I can't really explain it. It's not like, I never experienced, a tragic, holiday time. My parents are divorced. So there was a point in time where, things got dark, but I've always found that there was joy in that build up for Christmas. And it was like seeing Christmas lights and seeing a Christmas tree. I've always had a Christmas tree in my room ever since I was a little kid. I think the one in my room was like 6 feet tall. So it was almost as big as the one.
I was picturing some like little thing.
No, I had a full on Christmas tree in my room. And I may have told this story before, but it even got to the point like, as my parents were divorced, I would split the holidays on college. And so I would go to one house, which was in Mississippi. I would go to their house for like Thanksgiving, and then I would do Christmas in South Carolina, or I would do South Carolina for Thanksgiving and then Christmas in Mississippi. But my parents just knew how much joy that brought me, just like being in the Christmas spirit. To where they would decorate. If I was going home for Thanksgiving to either South Carolina or Mississippi, they would decorate for Christmas before I got there, just because they knew the joy that it brought. And I think maybe this was on one of the meetings, I can't remember, but somebody asked me, oh, why did you, because November 2nd, I put up my Christmas tree. And
November 2nd.
Yeah, November 2nd, I put up my Christmas tree, and they were like, why do you put it up in November? It's not even Thanksgiving. And I'm like, well, first, like, that joy of Christmas always came before Thanksgiving. It's what got me through some of those dark times with, parents divorcing and, even when like grandparents passed away, and it just always got me through the hard time. And it wasn't that I felt like as a kid, it had to be worked on, and it wasn't like it was always natural, and it wasn't like every day I was joyful and some Christmas spirit like the elf, like Buddy the elf. There were days where, I would feel down during those times, and that's normal. You feel those emotions. You just don't let it take that joy of Christmas away all the way. You kind of get back up on that horse. So November 2nd of this year, I put up my Christmas tree. I'm like, it's been a year. I want Christmas in my life. I want to bring this joy into my life every day I'm here. I'm doing it. And I was already going to decorate before Thanksgiving. That was just a given. There was no question about that. But, November 2nd, I'm like, all right, I'm doing it. I'm pouring some eggnog because the eggnog just came out. Pouring some eggnog, putting on my country Christmas music I used to listen to as a kid, and I'm decorating my entire apartment. And it's because I think I've gotten in that habit of this brings me joy, just the spirit of it, that connection, to where I needed that this year. And I think as 2020, and we can of course look back on the terrible, terrible things that have happened this year. I think we can still program and routine ourselves to find the joy in Christmas. And sometimes it might be hard as children, but I know it can be done. Maybe I don't know exactly how to do that because I'm not a parent. I just have my dog. But maybe, there's encouragement that if you're listening to this and you're a parent and you're wondering how am I going to bring joy, it can be done. I don't have the answers, but I can give you the hope that it can be done.
That's interesting. Sorry, Lenny, were you going?
No, go ahead. I'm done.
It's interesting what you kind of said is like you had to put forth effort to bring that kind of joy back into your life. We've been talking about how joy sneaks up on you and surprise, but there is that element of joy where we have to do a little work to make sure that we kind of foster like kind of joy in our lives, And I don't think we want to do that. I think we just want to be surprised and it just stay there, right?
Yep.
Oh, great, joy's here, and we're just done,
Yeah, I think we do want to. There is that element of surprise to it, but one of the questions that I had sort of going through me is there things we can do to like prime ourselves for the likelihood of experiencing joy, not manufacturing it necessarily or not trying to engineer it, but just some things that we can do just to put some air in a tire somewhere that makes it more likely to happen. And what I've heard several times with this, Marcia, you were talking about it, Lenny, a lot of the examples that you were talking about of what brings joy is there's this real element of nowness to it. It's this appreciation of something that you see or seeing or hearing or experiencing right now, where either the abandonment of stuff that happened or that will happen lets you appreciate something that's happening right now, or something that is happening right now is happening at the exclusion of past, future stuff, where you're going, where you abandon all of this to draw a specific attention to something that is fleeting. That is fleeting, like a sunrise, like a holiday season, like whatever it sort of might be. It's like joy in this moment of this thing with this thing right now that's happening, right? And I'm not worried about that thing anymore because I'm experiencing this present joy in whatever this sort of experience
I think
is.
Any practice that helps us be more present or more awake can help us cultivate joy. Whether it's, like Marcia talked about, taking a walk instead of a run, taking the time to read the poetry walls and see what's there. Or if it's, a gratitude journal, anything that helps us kind of take the blinders off and just stop being so focused on like to-do lists and expectations that we open ourselves up to seeing what's happening around us. Any of those practices, I think, automatically cultivate joy or make us more open to receiving it.
Yeah. I think joy and wonder might be kind of connected too. So things that we can do that stir wonder within us. I read this book once, I think it's called The Aesthetics of Joy. And she talks about there are certain things that we can see in the world that just bring people joy. And it relates, Marcia, to what you were saying about the silliness, bubbles blown, what is it about bubbles that are just delightful, but we love them, right? I have a friend, Aaron, who I used to call him something like, I forget, the director of joy or something like this, because he just brings joy into the world through random silliness. He's just excited about color. But there's just this wonderment that I think brings joy. And yesterday, my husband and we had these LED lights that I brought home from work. And I was like, I don't really know what to do with these. These aren't really Christmas lights. And we decided to tack them up on the two walls of our bedroom, like we're teenagers. There's really no reason for this. Yeah. And we got all grumpy, putting them up, and it was a whole adult grumpiness thing. And, are they even and all this? And then we just turned them on in our bedroom, and there's just these little trickles of light everywhere. And we were just delighted. It was just, and Eric, my husband, who's on the episode about hope being the cynic, is this brings me joy. And I'm like, me too. Because it's just wonder, and it's silly, but it's just delightful. Yeah.
Yeah, the word that I was thinking, Cheri, right before you were talking about that was that there's a quality of awe to it. Being awed by something, and this maintaining that ability to be awed by things, a song, the feelings associated with a season, a sunrise, that kind of stuff. That definitely, I when you said that, I was like, me too, right? The same thing, the same thought came to me about that, for sure.
Yeah, what brings you joy, Paul Fitzgerald?
Oh, what brings me joy? Well, I was thinking about that when we started. It's like, well, that ain't that funny, because it's like I think of the things that it's like, what are the things that make me so happy that I really like to do? And it's like cooking. And it's like, wait a minute, there's a book about that, isn't there? You know, the joy of cooking. It's like, well, yeah, there is a joy to it. For some, not all, right? Lenny says, I'm going to know down there from Lenny. I was just noticing this. I sent out a lot of holiday cards, this year as my wont. I do that often, and I was telling my wife, it was like, I really get a lot of enjoyment. It's like just kind of hanging out and fooling around with ink and finding the right pen and what cards am I going to get this year? And it's like everything about the whole process of writing these holiday cards and sending them brings me this joy that it's like it's fleeting. It happens once a year. It only takes a couple hours, days to go through it and do it. And I figure out what little stamp do I want to put on it? And it's like, ooh, should I wax seal the envelopes this year? Should I just lick them like a commoner, and it's like, my God, what am I doing here? This is crazy. But just the joy that I get. I mean, you can tell by looking at me as I'm talking about this. It's like I just get this joy out of doing that. That is just a lot of fun, and I'm not sure why it is.
So as you're saying that, Paul, you're making me. I was thinking about, is there a connection between joy and creativity and creating?
Oh, maybe.
And that made me remember that mine and Marty's preaching professor, John Claypool, was just a renowned preacher and an incredible man. And he used to talk a lot about creation. And the way that he would describe the creation story, the Genesis 1 creation story, is that God took sheer delight and experienced ecstasy. That was the word he always used in the act of creating. And I would think that delight and ecstasy are both connected with joy as well, right? And so John Claypool would say that God experienced such delight and ecstasy in the act of creating that out of a spirit of generosity, God then created humans so that there would be other beings that could experience the delight and ecstasy of creating. So if that's true, experiencing joy is really a part of our DNA.
Yeah.
Right? It's part of why we exist.
Mm-hmm. And it might be part of why we experience joy over the things that other people have created, right? Like joy at what Taylor Swift has created.
Mm-hmm.
And there you are.
Joy at what God has created, like a sunrise, or joy at the act of creating the cards, right? Choosing the pen and deciding about the wax seal and what words to write, and
It also gives us kind of space to dream too, dream about what we want to see happen and finding the energy to work hard to create,
Yeah, right.
And that's maybe even why joy can continue to surprise us even when we're experiencing deep pain.
Because you can.
That even in the midst of grief, we can find ourselves surprised and for a moment smiling over a memory or, a puppy video on TikTok or something,
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheri can't get away with it this time. So what brings you joy? What brings you? The oldest trick in the book is to be the person that asks the question, because then you don't have to answer it yourself, right? So that's
Busted, Cheri.
I already said the lights in my
The
bedroom.
lights in your bedroom. Anything else?
That's yeah, no, oh, I don't know. You know, we're talking a lot about creation. I think right now, my biggest source of joy might be actually my creative projects.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say that vaguely so that they don't compliment the man that asked the question. But I don't know. I get there's this dude named Paul, and we make a lot of stuff together, it's become a source of joy. It's something. I think about a year ago, probably. Robin and I had lunch, and like I was talking to her about like all the things that I wanted to be able to create in the world. Like I wanted to be able to eventually one day write a book and things like that. I'm like, in the last month, Paul and I have written over 90 pages
we got a lot
of text. So. And that's the most I've written since my dissertation. And boy, has it been a lot more joyful.
Yeah, it has been.
So right now, yeah, like I think creative projects bring me a lot of joy.
Yeah.
Well, I got a couple papers that I can send your way if you want a little bit more joy in your life.
I don't think those would bring me joy. I don't know.
Okay. That was just an offer. I was just trying to help you.
Lenny, tell her they're creative papers. Maybe that'll help.
Yes, they are creative papers. One is on the Great Commission and cultural intelligence. So I think you can let your mind just run free with it and get joy out of it.
Actually, you mentioned earlier, like, you're really into words. Like, oh, send me a paper where you define a word using the Oxford English Dictionary. That will bring me joy.
Some joy right there, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's more of a habit now to look up words. I don't know if it really brings me joy. Maybe it might bring me joy after I'm done with the semester, but it's more of a habit. Like you say a word and I'm like, oh, it was a word. It's joy. You know, what are some scriptures that are like, I love that have joy in it. And then like that got my mind going on, oh wait, what is that word, that Hebrew word for joy? Where is it used? And it got into my academic brain of things. And then I went down that rabbit hole. But yeah, I wouldn't say words is my joy.
Oh, well, it's mine.
Yeah.
Unless
that's Lonnie Rich's joy. As you
it is
know,
Lonnie's.
well,
Yeah, it is Lonnie's.
That's why I love Lonnie Rich, man. Like that man, like, what's your vocab word of the day, sir? Like just makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Well, and the best part is he does those 5 words every day, and he puts them together in a sentence. And the sentences are ridiculous. They're just so hilarious.
Yet grammatically correct, I'm sure. Right.
And then if he gets really inspired, what he does is he takes the words and he writes a card to each one of the grandkids using the words.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So
That's adorable.
Isn't that great? So Simone, who is just coming up on 2, so her words today were zip and zilch. So he wove into the story. So Simone, when you don't get a cookie, you don't get juice, you don't get zip, or you don't get zilch. And Sarah, my stepdaughter Lonnie's daughter, the mother of Simone, actually sent us a video of her reading the card to Simone. Oh my God, it was just joy. She was just so thrilled. Zip, zilch.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to answer the question. It's hard to answer that question though. Is like what gives you joy? Because I don't know. It's always been a surprise.
Yeah.
It's always just I can tell you things that I remember that were joyful, but it's like saying that I'm going to do this thing that brings me a lot of joy, and I'm going to do it again in the hopes that it does again. Oh my God, what if it doesn't? Then you've engineered not joy, but disappointment. So it's always just been such a surprise, like it's been said.
Don't you think that when we really cultivate joy in our lives, it becomes something that kind of stays with us? That it may not always be like the big heightened emotions that like make us so joyful we want to cry or something, but that there is this sustaining thing about it This is going to be like a hard left turn here. But one thing that I have thought about a lot, and I thought about a lot in thinking that we were going to talk about joy, is when back in 2017, when I joined clergy in Charlottesville for the day of the Unite the Right rally. The night before that rally, there was a worship service. And Cornel West was one of the speakers, and he kept talking about joy, which was so strange to me, since there were like white supremacists with tiki torches across the street from us. And then that next day during the rally, when I was with clergy, my friend Leah that I was there with and I were both very aware and struck by the fact that the white clergy that were there, that were present, we were all clearly nervous, and we were all just burdened, like heavy. But there in the midst of the heaviness was some sense of joy from the clergy who were also people of color that were there.
Right.
That was absent from the white folks there. And I think that there is, I've thought about that. I mean, since 2017, like, what was that? And I think there might be something with the fact that I was thinking about this today, that if joy is rooted in the good life, right? A flourishing life, what really matters, then there is a drive to change and fix things that are destructive, right? The things that take away life or destroy life, right? If we know the goodness and the joy that comes from what makes life flourish, then we want to take those things that destroy that or break it down and fix them so that others can experience flourishing life, right? So there is, yes, we get surprised by joy, but I think there is also a kind of joy and awareness of what is good in life that can stay with us and drive us to be people to create more goodness in life.
Yes.
No, that was really good.
Yeah.
I think you're spot on. You're spot on. Like I feel like, yes, joy is it surprises you, but then, and I think this kind of ties back to what Marty was saying. Sometimes we have to find joy in the least most expected place that we can.
What was it you said earlier that Marcia wrote down?
Voice of protest to a life of despair.
There you go.
So it's
like the passage for Sunday where, Isaiah was telling these people who just came back from home from the exile, like the prophecy has been fulfilled. You have your freedom, and you have the land back, but it's going to take hard work for you to make it like you see it or how you want it. And joy comes in that hard work. It's not just, joy's not something that just, it surprises you, but sometimes you really have to do the hard work that brings you the joy. It's the dream that you have. And it's hard work to make that dream come true. And in that hard work, you find joy.
Do you think then, playing on that though, Marty and Robin, do you think then that it's really not the pursuit of joy? Is it joy is a product, a byproduct of effort? It's an act of worship. It is being present, being awake. Is joy the pursuit, or is joy what happens when you're truly living that a spiritually a life where you're living in right relationship with God. Is that like, is joy the gift or is joy the product?
I think joy is what you get out of, I think it's the reaction, the cause and effect. So it's the effect of it. Like, so I feel like I feel like when you're trying to find things that are positive in a situation that's not so positive, there's joy that comes out of that. Kind of what, Robin was mentioning. She was surrounded by such negative things to where there was such a burden, but the hunt for where that good stuff is what brought so much joy in that situation.
Like, I don't know, like, does your dreams bring you joy? And then in trying to make those dreams come true, does that hard work bring you joy?
I think it can be a both and, right?
I think that joy is just along for the ride, and it just, whether you tap into it or not, that surprises you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Well, it seems like joy is at times the sustainer. Joy, like moments of joy, is what keeps us going. And then because we understand the importance of joy is the thing we have to fiercely protect, and we have to make sure others have access to. And that's part of the work that I think Robin's talking about. So yeah, it's maybe joy is just the point, and we're doing whatever we can to tap into it.
That seems to be it. Hence you find joy, you look for it and then it's found. Yeah, then it's found.
Yeah.
Right. And, look, a pink candle.
Why is the pink candle?
I was just feeling I would be remiss, right, if we ended this without me asking. It's like I would so regret if this ended without me saying, so what's with the pink candle anyway? Because that's ultimately, Cheri, right? That's been my question since day one of this, right?
I considered getting you a box of pink candles for Christmas, but I went a different direction. So
yeah, that's funny.
Next year, maybe.
Yeah. So, Marty, is it like you said? Is it a reminder on the Advent candle set that it's?
Yeah, I think that was kind of the tradition.
Make it a little unique.
Joy was such a different element that they needed, and it was so different from like hope and peace that they needed to give it its own color.
Well, it's got its own name. It's called Gaudete Sunday. Yeah. I'm trying to look up why.
Yeah. And I think it's a reminder that, hey.
Gaudete is the Latin word for rejoice, Lenny.
Oh.
You should know that.
Well, I'm not studying Latin.
Oh, okay.
Don't throw me into that one. I don't. No, please don't.
Yeah, Lenny. Right.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It's Hebrew right now, so.
Okay.
We'll get a Latin in a couple thousand years, right? Yeah.
But maybe that candle's pink because, like, color is one of the things that brings us joy, according to the Aesthetics of Joy book. So it gives us a little variety. Like, we look at that collection of candles and we're like, ooh, look at the pink one.
Ooh, there's an accent candle. Right.
It's an accent candle.
Yeah, once again, it's a surprise.
Well, sometimes it's just even the tradition of certain things and how people do certain things is what brings them joy. Like decorating a Christmas tree, like sometimes you might want to wonder why a Christmas tree, but not a lot of people ask why a Christmas tree. They just find joy in that tradition of decorating it. Like, for example, my parents find joy in new Christmas ornaments. So I actually got them a Christmas ornament of toilet paper. Like, it was a little toilet paper that says 2020 on it. Because we can later on, I'm hoping we could find joy in the fact that we all ran out to a grocery store to go buy toilet paper. At some point, I'm holding on that we can find joy or even just laugh about it at some point. But that's a tradition, and to somebody, maybe that pink candle is a tradition that they've grew up with that sparks that little bit of joy for some reason they just don't know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It could be because someone really worked hard to create that pink candle, or it just happened to be like that, like a sunrise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious about one thing, Lenny. You said you put your Christmas decorations up on November 2nd. I'm curious when you take them down. Is it like August?
No,
middle of September.
No. Usually,
because like you've been waiting. It's like what is it, like 2 months, right?
No, we usually would try to put it down before the new year.
Oh, so it's pretty quick after then.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So my parents always say you never start the new year with old stuff.
Oh.
That's the very southern sayings of stuff.
Interesting.
Now this year, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that because, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. That's a lot of decorations.
Take your time.
Put a lot of ribbon in it this
Take your
year.
time.
So sparkly ribbon. It makes me happy. Say again?
Give yourself until Epiphany. Let the wise men come first.
That's what everybody's saying. They're like, oh, it's like middle of like January. Keep it up. And I'm like, no, you don't bring the old stuff into the new year.
Oh.
Sometimes you do.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not bringing the 2020 stuff in the 2021.
Right.
Sorry, it's going up.
Fair.
Done.
That's fair.
That's fair.
Cool.
Oh, well, I think recording this podcast has been very joyful this evening.
Me too.
Just seeing everybody's faces has been joyful. I feel like I haven't seen many faces.
Yeah.
For the record,
Yeah, I was going to say, where are we at, Robin?
Taylor Swift's name, except for this time, has been mentioned 13 times.
Oh, that's her favorite number. That's her favorite number. What?
And 6 of those were by Lenny.
Seeing joy right there.
Oh my goodness. That just it made my entire night. And now that's recorded. So that's embarrassing.
If only we did video, right?
And if
Sorry.
all of you listening had been able to see Lenny's posture when his face lit up and he started clapping.
And that's her birthday, December 13th. Sorry, we are not going on this soapbox. We're done. That soapbox can go forever.
I hope
You'll just have to tweet it at her.
Yeah, there we go. I hope our listeners take as much joy from listening to us talk about T-Swizzle as she brings.
Can I give a little note? So if anybody is watching or listening to this and they know Taylor or have any connection to Taylor, I will give you my email, my phone number, my address, my Facebook, my Venmo, whatever you want if I get to meet her. So I'm just putting that out.
Make that connection happen.
Yeah, make it happen.
Yeah. We'll tweet this at her directly.
Yeah.
This episode brought to you by love for Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift.
Thank
Joy.
you, Marcia and Lenny.
No, thank you for having us.
You. It was such a pleasure to be with you, especially with
Yeah.
you. Just love you to pieces. Miss you so much.
Oh my gosh. Miss y'all. Miss y'all.
This podcast is produced by Cheri Spiegel, Paul Fitzgerald, and This Most Unbelievable Life. For more information, please check us out at www.thismostunbelievablelife.com.